Welcome to the Marketing Impact Podcast with your host, Mike Wood from Legalmorning.com, providing tips and the latest trends in the world of marketing.
And welcome to the Marketing Impact Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Wood from Legalmorning.com. Today we're going to be talking about brand engagement with your customers, potential client base, employee engagement for your brand. Now, with me is marketing expert Nicholas Allen. Now, Nicholas Allen has a background in music, design, video production, and has authored 2 books. The first of which is Death to the Starving Artist. He's basically found a way to make what he does in life as a way to market it. Now, what we're going to be talking about is some techniques that he's put into his second and most recent book, which is Heavyweight Marketing, Knockout Strategies for Building Champion Brands. How are you doing today, Nicholas?
Excellent. Thanks, Mike. Glad to be here.
Hey, I'm very happy you came on today. Read the book, loved the book, and think the audience here is going to get some important information out. Now, what can you tell us about the importance of brand engagement?
Let's see. Well, engagement, super important. Now, in the days of old, you had companies kind of shouting their messages via the one-way channels of communication, which, TV, radio, and print. And then, of course, the internet came along, and specifically the social media era, which actually gave consumers kind of a voice, and it gave them a two-way connection to their favorite brands, their favorite companies. Now, some companies were frightened by this because they thought that they would lose control of their own narrative. And in that case, yes, it does happen. But of course, the smart companies realized the importance. Hey, we can talk to our people, find our loyal audience, and really engage them. And the reason it's important is because it shows the humanity behind the brand, right? Because typically you've got your faceless companies, just kind of shouting these messages, and they're just not human. So it kind of, shows some humanity. It also builds relationships, very important. Obviously, that's what you want to do with your audience, build the relationship. It makes the customers feel important, kind of like their voice is being heard and like they matter. And ultimately, it creates loyalty, between the customer and the brand. And I think that's super important in this super competitive marketplace, because if you have that extra little something, that extra connection with your people, you're going to create the loyalty that keeps them coming back for more. And again, when they have a million choices out there, why not build a relationship that keeps them coming to you?
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. And I always tell my clients about social media, you need to get on there. Don't wait. And you must engage your audience. Before, like you said, you build a brick and mortar store or online presence before social media was really big.
Right.
And, you really only had one channel of communication with your customers. It's, through your product, maybe a phone number to call customer service.
Right.
But there really wasn't any type of channel for customers to really engage you. But now they have found that channel. They have found social media. They take to social media every day. So they're engaging you on social media right now. If you're not, there's an issue, and there could be a major problem. So, they've created that avenue, and it's time, if you haven't already, to start embracing it.
Absolutely. And it can be a little overwhelming because there's so many platforms out there. And, of course, all the marketing experts, every time a new one pops up, they're like, you got to be on this. You got to.
Absolutely.
And it's crazy because the entrepreneurs, the business owners, they're already wearing a lot of hats. They're already doing a lot of work, and to suddenly become a social media manager or to worry about having to bring someone in and do it or whatnot, and especially if they don't understand it, it gets to be a little frightening, and it can snowball around them quickly, and then of course they opt for the choice to do nothing about it, and not do any social, or just freak out and get paralyzed thinking that there's too many platforms and not enough time. So
absolutely, and it happens all the time.
We'll talk about that a little bit later, but there's the short answer is you don't need to be on all of them. So
Yeah, exactly. I tell people, don't worry about creating profiles. If you want to create profiles everywhere, that's great.
Right.
You're going to create backlinks and everything, but and which we'll talk about in just here in a second is how to identify your customers. Mm-hmm. But choose the couple platforms where your customers are,
exactly.
where they're engaging you. If they're engaging you on Twitter, don't go and create a Facebook page and ignore Twitter.
Right.
You got to go where they are. So, how do you identify these customers on social media now?
Well, let's take a step back, because this is huge, and the identification of your customer really needs to happen at the outset of forming your business, right? Because a lot of people think, we can just be everyone to everybody, and that is guaranteed to fail. So you've got to find your people. And what I like to say is that you're seeking the people who will derive the most value from your offering, okay? And if you want to break it down into a niche market, for example, new parents or first-time homeowners or athletes or college students, you can start there. That's okay. You can always expand from there. But don't be afraid to kind of focus on kind of a narrow audience. And if you need to break it down further into demographics and psychographics, of course, that's all available. But like you said, earlier, find out who they are, and once you do that, find out where they are. And like I mentioned, there's so many platforms out there, but you really only need to be where your people are, where your audience is. And again, chances are they're not on every platform, no matter what the latest marketing expert is suggesting. And again, once you kind of know what matters to your people, and when you figure out who they are and the niche market you're going after, and you find out what their values are, what their needs and desires are, and once you know that, then you can kind of engage them on those same levels and build those relationships and that loyalty that I was talking about earlier.
And I love that attitude, too. I might point out at how you say, you're looking for people who you can help, not just people that you can shove your product down their throat.
Right.
Because, that's another part of brand engagement we're not going to get into today. But, creating, filling a need of people does more than filling your own needs, because you're going to get back to referrals more, and we'll talk about it slightly in employee brand engagement, but it's really important to create a bond with your customer, not just a sale.
Yeah,
so.
And even if you are selling them, by kind of determining what it is that what's going to benefit them, how their life is going to be better from your product you're offering. Once you kind of have that intel, then you can craft the messages that appeal to them. So, at least you're selling. We all have to sell. We need to affect our bottom line if we're going to be a viable business. But I think it's the way that you kind of do it, and whether it's engagement or clear selling, that it needs to be a little more careful and meaningful, I guess. Meaningful marketing versus just blatant car salesmanship.
Exactly. Here it is. Buy it. So. Now, for those listening, stick around, because sometime in the podcast we're going to tell you how you can actually get a copy of Nicholas's new book. Actually, there's going to be 2 signed copies that he's given away, so stay tuned, and we're going to tell you the details on how to get that here a little bit later. Now, let's talk about employee brand engagement. Very important. I don't think not enough companies do it now. I think a lot of companies are scared that their employees are going to talk bad about them, maybe because they may not treat them as well as they should. But let's talk about employee brand engagement. How important is it?
Well, it's very important, and it's a lot easier when you're a small company, because you only have a handful of employees, and you can train them properly, I guess, as to the values of the brand, the messaging, the brand promise. The employees, you have to remember that they are the stewards of your brand, and branding starts at the top, so it needs to trickle down to everyone on your team, and that can start with questions like, who are we, what do we stand for, what's our brand promise, and what do we do better than anyone else. And when you hear the term branding, you hear, or you think a lot about just the visual identity, the logo, the look. And of course, the visual identity is important, but it's even more important to understand your company's own unique story, and then to tell that story cohesively at every touch point through a combination of visuals, messaging, and actions. And like I said, that's where training comes in. If you hire some people and you don't have some sort of brand guidelines to pass on to them, to, kind of pass down and train them with, then they're kind of just running wild. And especially if those are the people that are going to be manning your social channels, they need to kind of have some type of a idea of what their voice is, what the brand voice is. And so once they're trained, hold them accountable. Hold them accountable for their actions, whether positive or negative. I know for a fact several people personally who have been fired because they were stupid on social media, ripping on customers or the boss and that kind of stuff. And,
Yep.
and
there's pages and pages of examples
exactly.
We can probably put up.
Yeah.
In fact, I'll put a couple up on the blog post for this podcast. But go ahead. I'm sorry.
Perfect. And, the training the employees to kind of be stewards of the brand, of course, it gets harder as the company grows. And Starbucks is one of my favorite examples. I love Starbucks. I know that they get a bad rap for being huge and corporate and all that stuff, but they always serve, or they used to always serve, I'll get to that in a second, a consistent brand experience. But they are so huge now that no matter how badly Howard Schultz wants to create a perfect experience at every visit, things fall through the cracks. And the last three times that I've been at Starbucks, I've been very disappointed with the quality of the product and the service. And again, I know I've read Howard's book, and I know that this is very important to him. And, when you get some random little Starbucks in a bookstore in Redding, California, with a little high school person behind the counter, there's a chance that person didn't get Howard Schultz's memo that you need to be present, be, careful, and serve up the best coffee in the world. So that's, getting harder. It gets hard to do that as the companies grow. But I tell you, even the small companies, they fail to build the brand guidelines into the DNA of their team. And it's super important because what I like to say is, Mike, if you want to stand out, you've got to brand out. All right. And if you don't think it's important, well, there's plenty of your competitors who will think it's important, and they will swipe up your customers when you fail to serve them properly.
Exactly. And now for those listening who are thinking, I'm really not sure if I really want to do this, I can tell you this, okay? I can recommend your book to anyone here on this podcast. And everyone's going to say, maybe I should look into it. Maybe I should buy it. But I guarantee you, if I go to my neighbor, to my friends, to my family, and say, hey, buy Nicholas's book, each and every one of them are going to buy a copy. And that's because my friends and family trust me with my recommendations.
Cool.
Now, it's similar to Starbucks. If you get an employee from Starbucks that goes to their friends and family and says, this is the best company I've ever worked for, or they have the best cup of coffee. Doesn't matter how many times you go in there and get bad coffee. You're going to rely on this type of recommendation from that employee. Absolutely. And employees from within that company are better to give the referral than people on the outside. So it's extremely important. An example I used in another podcast was, if you walk into the Adidas store and your employee is wearing Nike shoes, you've got a problem.
Right.
Now everyone running a shoe store is going to run back today and go, what type of shoes are you wearing? Okay, we're good. Yeah. So, yeah, absolutely. Now, let's break into the topic everybody hates to talk about, and that is dealing with negative people. Because with social media...
The trolls.
Yes, and trolls, yes, you've heard the term don't feed the trolls, and we'll talk about that in a minute too. But... people take to social media now, and with the invention, I should say, of the internet, with the new technologies, people are able to hide behind profiles and say anything they want about you. And in reality, we won't get into the laws, but the websites aren't obligated to take some of this stuff down. Now, that's one aspect of it, and we'll talk about that briefly. The other one is, if somebody has a bad experience in your store and they have to come and talk to you face-to-face, more than likely they're going to be more calm than not.
Right.
if they take to social media and they don't have that human element in there, not in front of them, they no longer see you as a human. They see you as a company, corporation, a profile online, and they may bash you.
They are going to let the vitriol fly, let me tell you.
And I'll put some examples up on this as well, but I've seen some horrific discussions against brands on social media for some minor things.
Right.
You know, it may have been big to the person who experienced it, but, you know, to the company, now you have this person who has just announced to the world how bad of an experience they had. Now how do you deal with that negativity?
Well, the great thing about social media, Mike, is that it gives the common man a voice. And the terrible thing about social media, Mike, is that it gives the common man a voice. Now, if you ever want to get very depressed at the state of the society we live in, just read YouTube comments for about 5 minutes.
Horrible.
Either that or watch Fox News. Either one of those will put you in a state of
You can go to Twitter and search any trending topic on Twitter. You can go there right now and search it and just read the comments. And it's terrible.
Yeah.
It's horrible. These people couldn't be in the same room together.
Exactly. And I said earlier that in the days of old, the companies were shouting their messages via their own megaphones, and now every consumer has a megaphone, and they've got a large audience, so they're not afraid to use it. So I guess the challenge of trolls is, do we engage them or do we ignore them? And you have a few options. Obviously, you could ignore them. I don't think that the experts advise this because you think you could just ignore them and they go away, but no, sometimes it looks like they're getting the better of you. Celebrities on Instagram, for example, I follow a few people on Instagram who have millions of followers. They're in the public eye, and some of the comments on their posts are just brutal and rude, and they got to have thick skin to actually just keep posting these pictures every day and knowing that there's people out there just trying to tear them down. So you can ignore them. Otherwise, you could meet them at their level. Now, there was a great example of this. Rock singer Rob Zombie posted a photo or a video on his Facebook page, and of course people were chiming in saying, "Oh, did you get that hat from your girlfriend? And when did you become a hipster?" and all this. And he kind of went through and replied with snarky comments right back at them, pulling photos of them from their feed and saying stuff like, "You, sir, have no business talking about what is hip," or "You have no reason to talk about style," So anyway, you can kind of meet them at their level, but that just escalates into a flame war, and that's no fun for anybody. So you could also kill them with kindness, and I think this is what most of the experts recommend. And Gary Vaynerchuk, a very popular social media presence, and he actually does it pretty well. For all his noise and bluster and F-bombs, when people kind of say, "Dude, I watched your video and I do not understand what the heck you're talking about," he'll say stuff like, "Well, gee, I'm sorry that I didn't make it communicate in a way that was clear enough for you to get it." And it's like, this guy's saying, "Well, darn, I can't be mad at him now. I can't offer a rebuttal that's negative and cruel." So, you kind of kill them with kindness, and I think that's really how you kind of get rid of diffuse some of the tension, I guess. Now, there's also a recent trend of deactivating comments, and I think that that's a direct response to, hey, there's a lot of negativity out there, and it takes man-hours to respond and to moderate and whatnot, and so they deactivate the comments altogether. Now, the problem with this, Mike, is that it's suddenly reverting to a Web 1.0 broadcasting monologue. All right, we've got these two-way communications, and we're shutting off one of the incoming path. And this is why a marketing expert, Seth Godin, you're familiar with Seth.
Absolutely.
He pisses me off because he's hailed as this marketing guru. Seth can do no wrong. But it's like he doesn't allow comments on his blog. Both his Facebook and his Twitter accounts are simply RSS feeds that pump his blog through those channels. And he follows 0 people. He's never on Facebook to engage people. So it's kind of like he clearly follows the do as I say, not as I do. And to me, I think that's pretty sad. So I think also you have to think about the bottom line. If you're a small company or even if you're a large one, is it going to be cost-effective to have your people sitting there getting in these flame wars with the trolls online? And usually the answer is no. So I think you got to be careful of where you're putting your resources when it comes to dealing with the negative people on social media.
Exactly. Now, one thing that I can tell people out there, too, is there seems to be a trend now where brands who have their act together, and when I say have their act together, I mean they're online. You know, we talk about Seth. You know, I don't know exactly about his interaction, but I can tell you.
It's zero.
You know, exactly.
He has a book to promote.
You know, what you got to do, what you have to do is you have to work in real-time marketing. You can automate anything you want, and I automate a lot, but you have to be on there to respond to people, which is what we're talking about now. Even if somebody says a good comment about you, hey, I really liked your blog post, and you don't say thank you or even retweet it, they're like, why should I even compliment this person? You know, people are looking for some type of reciprocity.
Exactly.
Now, another thing that I'm talking about, a trend here, is when you have your act together, the people who trust your brand and know your brand, like your brand, support your brand, will actually help you out at times. If you have trolls that come to your site, and we're not talking about a customer making a complaint. We're talking about, like you're talking about, the celebrities, people coming on and making a snide comment. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure you see these on the comments as well. You'll have other people jumping in for you.
The defenders, yep.
And they will defend you. But you can't get to that level of assistance until you are engaging your brand. Because, again, when we're talking about the reciprocity, you know, if this company don't care about me and I'm here talking about them and trying to defend them, then why should I do anything for them? I don't want to say it's the attitude, but it's kind of the mantra now. You know, it's the way it is. So, you know, if they don't care about me and what I'm doing, I'm not going to step up to defend them. I'm going to let them take care of themselves. But if you have a brand that's, hey, you know, we appreciate this, and they're very responsive on social media, they reach out and they're talking and engaging with their customers and clients, those people now feel like they're part of the brand, right, and will actually come to defend you. I've seen it hundreds of times.
Exactly. And it goes back to what we were talking about earlier, where you are building loyalty amongst your tribe, your people, and then, hey, when stuff comes at you that's negative, they'll stand up and defend you, and that's a good place to be in.
Exactly. And back to the employee thing for a minute, like you're saying, you know, you don't want someone to say, hey, I had a bad experience at Starbucks, to an employee that they're friends with, and that employee goes, oh my God, yes, I know, I work there. You know, that there's an issue with that. Right. So, you know, it's all about building the company culture from within. Yes. Now I'm going to give you my favorite example, I guess my recent example of brand engagement, and I think it was ingenious, and it was Zappos and Google. And Google can't be trumped. I'm sorry. It's hard to trump Google. But Zappos did this. And I'm going to put the link up on the podcast. Cool. But it was the commercial where the Google cupcake truck, which goes out occasionally and parks in the street just like a food truck and gives away free cupcakes. And so Zappos followed the Google truck around, and they had this big shoebox with a window in it. And they sat it right next to the Google cupcake truck. So people would get their cupcakes, and they'd look at this box next to it, and it said, you know, trade your cupcake in, basically, for something better. And people were kind of, you know, I'm not quite sure, but they did. They put their cupcake in the hole, and then somebody inside would hand out a pair of shoes. Nice. So it was a friendly way to troll Google, which, right, you know, I'm sure Google didn't mind because they got the press and everything out of it. But it was a great brand engager because, I mean, this video is viral now. I mean, everyone's looking at it, and the only thing in your head is Zappos. And it shows just how they have interacted with customers, potential customers. You know, they're not just saying, hey, we sell shoes, come buy them. Right. They're putting a little personal touch to it, more of an interaction as opposed to a billboard with here we sell shoes. Yeah, and it's tricky too because who doesn't love cupcakes? And they're asking people to give up these free cupcakes, and who knows what you'll get. But yeah, and when people watch this video, you're going to see there's some people that were kind of reluctant. They're looking at the cupcake, looking at the box, looking at their cupcake, looking at their box, right, and it was a tough decision. And so do you have any examples that you like? Well, first off, Zappos is great. I've had nothing but wonderful experiences with their customer service and with their product and their shipping and everything. So they're definitely an example of a company that really gets it right. I think one of my
my faves was the Old Spice. When they kind of reinvented themselves with the Old Spice guy, I think it was back in like 2010. That was awesome. And then the thing they followed that up with was called the Old Spice Video Response Campaign, and it was because they basically built up this ardent following of people who tweeted at them and asked Old Spice guy a bunch of questions. And what he did is created individual videos that replied to a bunch of hand-picked questions, and they were just like churning these things out almost in real time, not quite, but it was just amazing. And so you're watching his latest video, and he's talking directly to a person who had posed a question on one of their social platforms, and I've enjoyed that whole the Old Spice guy campaign. And I tell you what, I'm going to flip it a little bit and say that this, Mike, my least favorite, and I'll talk a little bit about some other good stuff, but my least favorite is when brands shoehorn themselves into the conversation via, trending hashtags or slang of the day, like when Pizza Hut chimes in is all, pizza is bae, or Arby's will say hash browns on fleek, and it's like it just feels like they're trying so hard to be relevant, and, the IHOP Pancake House has all this kind of street slang on their Twitter feed and stuff, and, on some level, it works, I guess, because a lot of the younger folks are engaging with it and thinking, IHOP is cool, but to me, it just, of course, as marketing people, we tend to look at things with a little more jaded eye, but it just kind of it's a little odd to see them kind of shoehorning themselves in there with just trying to kind of get the attention or the it's almost like forced engagement, really. And then also when they kind of chime in on during notable events or holidays or tragedies, and they'll chime in and say, hey, Toyota car wishes you a happy Martin Luther King Day, and it's like, what?
I don't even do that. I don't even wish people, I think my most recent holiday post was, I think Thanksgiving. I said, happy Thanksgiving, get off social media.
Yeah, exactly.
But I don't tweet out, hey, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. It's everybody's saying it. We know everybody's happy about it. Right. Thank you. I'm not going to buy more shoes because you told me Merry Christmas. Right. Stay relevant to your brand. It's nothing wrong with doing that. Sending out quotes, which I recommend. I love the inspirational quotes, but be yourself. Yeah. Be yourself and be your brand. Don't try to jump on something else that's going on. So yeah.
Right. But I will tell you that my favorite brand engagement is not through the stunts or the gags or the gimmicks. It's more like the real-life, real-time responses that answer a question or help solve a problem, or even just demonstrate to us, the consumer, that there's a real person behind the brand who's listening and responding to their customers. And to me, that's what social media is all about. And that's when the moments of living in a connected digital age just become wonderfully apparent when you tweet to Zappos and say, hey, I had a problem, and they're like, hey, no problem, here's how you get it fixed, or any other company for that matter. And to me, that's really what the brand engagement is about.
Exactly.
Not telling me that your hash browns are on fleek.
Exactly. Test a brand. Absolutely test a brand. If you had a good experience at a restaurant, tweet it out to them. Hey, I just ate at your location at whatever. Great service.
Right. Do they respond?
See if somebody's behind the wheel.
Exactly.
Because you're going to get it where you're not going to see any mentions or any replies. Those are people that are on full automation.
Yeah.
And again, nothing wrong with automation. We don't have time to sit there and tweet all day.
Sure.
But the main point of this whole podcast is you have to be there to engage. So, any responses, any tweets that are towards you, or any Facebook comments, you really have to be there to address that, to show that there is a human side behind you, not just a computer churning stuff out. So,
absolutely.
Now, everybody in the podcast gets the final word. You basically get a minute to say anything you want to the audience, promotional, anything about the podcast you want to say. I won't interrupt you, and so whenever you're ready.
All right. Well, I want to end with a quote from Al Ries, who is the author of 22 Immutable Laws of Branding. He's got some other books out there as well. But Al says, brand building is boring work. What works best is absolute consistency over an extended period of time. And I tell you, it's hard for a brand or a company to be patient enough to create a brand and just run with it for the long haul, because everybody thinks, oh, well, it's not working. Let's change it. And again, it's absolute consistency over an extended period of time. And that's how you're going to build a brand. And I will also say that brand engagement is important, but it's just one element of building a meaningful brand. But I tell you, it is an important element, and it is essential if you hope to stand out in this noisy marketplace. And Mike, at this point, I would like to say let's give away a couple signed copies of my book, Heavyweight Marketing: Knockout Strategies for Building Champion Brands. And here is how you can win. First of all, tweet one thing that you learned or found interesting in this podcast. And of course, be sure to mention at Nicholas_Allen. And I'm sure that you'll throw that in there just so they see how to spell it.
Absolutely.
Okay. Be sure to mention at Nicholas_Allen so I can see it in my feed. And then over a few days, I will choose two random tweeters to win the book, and I'll grab your address via DM, and I will pop a signed copy in the mail so you can read about 300 pages of branding, marketing, and small business beauty.
And it's great. It's a great read.
Awesome.
It is
Thank
a great read, and it is worth it. So, again, as always, you can go to Legalmorning.com and click on the podcast tab, and I'll have all the details as well as, the social media accounts, link to the book, instructions for the autographed copies, and links to everything that we discussed here today. So, I really appreciate you coming on. It was a great discussion. I have to tell the audience here, I'm looking, we record this through Skype, and I'm looking at your Skype picture right now, and I cannot describe it in words. I'd love to put this up on the blog post if you let me.
That's my author photo for Death to the Starving Artist.
It's amazing. I mean, you want to talk about branding. This is awesome. It's a pink grenade with the pin in his mouth, and I've been staring at this whole podcast, and I can hear his voice come through this picture here, except for the pin. So no, it's great. So
and it was fun. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. Maybe we'll have you on again, discussing some more branding stuff in the future.
That would be great, Mike.
Okay, awesome. Thanks again, Nicholas. And until next time, this is Mike Wood from Legalmorning.com.
Thanks for listening to the Marketing Impact Podcast. For a copy of the information from this podcast, please go to Legalmorning.com and click the podcast tab. Until next time.